Hello, my name is Bob Pacheco, and I'm here today to talk about virtual reality and augmented reality and what it means for transforming how we educate our students and conduct business in the workplace today. Virtual and augmented reality have the power to transform our world through high-fidelity digital representations that incorporate our personal interactions. All this feeds into a rich, immersive user experience. What is virtual reality? As I'm sure most of you have heard this term by now, I will be brief in describing this emergent and rapidly maturing technology. Answering what is virtual reality in technical terms is straightforward. Virtual reality is a term used to describe a three-dimensional, computer-generated environment which can be explored and interacted with by a person. That person becomes part of this virtual world or is immersed within this environment, and whilst there, is able to manipulate objects or perform a series of actions. What is augmented reality? AR lets us see the real-life environment right in front of us with a digital display overlaying images such as kids playing in a park, a coworker seated right next to you in a meeting, or an engineer standing in front of a power panel. Over these different views could be a cartoon dinosaur romping around with the kids in a park, a coworker in a different state describing last week's TPS report to a regional manager, or visual projection highlighting diagnostic information for a failed power component that the engineer is working on. A famous example of AR technology is the mobile app Pokemon Go, which was released in 2016 and quickly became a sensation, which players locate and capture Pokemon characters that pop up in the real world. How mature and ready is this technology? Among us computer nerds, a seismic shift has occurred this past year. According to Gartner, augmented reality has officially moved out of their technology hype cycle. Augmented reality has matured so rapidly that it is no longer considered an emerging technology. From the graph, you can see that AR in our society is in the slope of enlightenment and is moving towards maturity and full productivity. AR/VR has the power to fundamentally alter the educational technology landscape. The current problem in AR/VR is twofold. One, how does one introduce it into coursework, especially in these days of COVID-19? And two, how do you get educational content for this coursework? Part of the answer is that educators, developers, and leaders are rapidly working through many of these issues. And at the very forefront of these efforts are the gamers and developers. As in internet days of the past, where a more prurient subject accelerated internet adoption, in AR/VR, the gaming and entertainment industry is paving the way for broad consumer-based appeal and acceptance of this revolutionary technology. What can we do with this technology? Well, pretty much anything we can imagine. The list below is just a smattering of what can be done in education and in business. The use case associated with these activities really depend on the level of immersion that is needed to convey the information to the participant. For example, you might take your students, all who are attending from home, on a virtual field trip to Paris to visit famous and historical sites. Here in the City of Lights, a full immersive experience would capture the wonder and majesty of this great city. Headgear such as the Oculus Quest 2 would completely enclose the student in a safe environment where their total experience would be augmented by their fellow students exploring the city together. Literally a field trip across the world with having to not worry about safety, cost, or travel time. A different educational scenario would have a medical intern learning how to deliver a breech baby using a combination of augmented reality glasses such as HoloLens 2 or Google Glass and simulated patient models. Dangerous and life-saving procedures could be observed closely by medical staff, educators, and classmates, and repeated as often as necessary to teach critical skills. The era of telemedicine is here today. So how best does AR/VR fit into the classroom, not to mention in business environments? From a business point of view, that is an easy answer. AR/VR is already being enthusiastically adopted. There are business cases and cost savings associated with adoption that is readily measurable to companies and industry bean counters. Whether that technology is used to train personnel on normally expensive simulated equipment using VR and haptic gloves, to technicians in the field diagnosing failing equipment with augmented reality glasses, you can make a cost savings or revenue generating case that is compelling and would be funded for content generation by the many companies that would gladly invest in cost savings and state-of-the-art processes. AR/VR adoption in education is more problematic. Plenty of institutions are using the technology on an ad hoc basis, but the idea of a grand strategy is still in a somewhat nascent stage. While certain groups, like CoSpace, are making inroads to establish standards with a defined user base, no one group or consortium has established dominance or a major market share. This is an important point, as an ISD or college district will be reluctant to invest scarce monetary resources to acquire the technology that spans numerous subjects without an assurance that they will have content for the students to justify the expense. To that end, and to aid the adoption of this technology, several standards have been established to help ascertain new technologies' adoption in the classroom. One standard in use for evaluating technology is ISTE's Standard for Students, which helps ensure that a technology adoption is a student-driven learning process adoption. Taking the standard and applying it to AR/VR demonstrates favorable outcome for students when and if the technology is applied properly. One thing to understand by the educator is that AR/VR is a platform where many other technological and pedagogical concepts and processes can be enhanced. AR/VR by itself is not a means to an end, but rather a force multiplier, so to speak. It enables access to what would normally be unavailable due to lack of location, cost, or any other barriers of entry by simulating environments, scenarios, or equipment overlaid with contextualized information, both auditory and visual. In fact, newer virtualization systems even incorporate haptic responses with hand and other anatomical devices that provide vital feedback to the user. On the screen before you is an assessment of AR/VR using the ISTE standards. As a quick primer, the technology is judged by these 7 major standards. Each standard has 4 substandards that further contextualize the standards and how they're addressed by the technology in question. The first standard is Empowered Learner. Students leverage technology to take an active role in choosing, achieving, and demonstrating competency in their learning goals. You can see out of the 4 substandards that AR/VR matches up very well with all 4 of them. Next up is Digital Citizenship. Students recognize the rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of living, learning, and working in an interconnected digital world. You can see here that it doesn't match up quite as well. 2 of the 4 substandards aren't met. The students cultivate and manage digital identity, and then students demonstrate and understand of respect for the rights and obligations of using and sharing intellectual property. Those 2 are more questionable, and you'll see later on that I'll talk about this. It's not that the AR/VR doesn't support this, it's that it's not really designed for that, and so it would need to be built into the coursework to actually support these. This third standard, Knowledge Constructor. Students critically curate a variety of resources using digital tools to construct knowledge, produce creative artifacts, and make meaningful learning exercises for themselves and others. By itself, you can see that we've only supported 1 strongly. The other 3 aren't really supported natively into the AR/VR environment. It's not designed necessarily to do that. Again, this would actually have to be addressed in the coursework to do that, but by doing that, the platform is actually immensely useful for that. The Innovative Designer Standard. You can see out of these 4 substandards, we only have 1 that we don't really support that well. Students exhibit a tolerance for ambiguity, perseverance, and the capacity to work with open-ended problems. Again, it can be built into the content that is actually used by the AR, but not natively. On the next standard, Computational Thinker, students develop and employ strategies for understanding and solving problems in ways that leverage the power of the technology. You can see here that we also have very good support. Only on 1 of those, students collect data or identify relevant data sets, use digital tools to analyze. That one particular, we don't necessarily support natively. Again, it's a visual and auditory and haptic census. Again, it can also then be built into the coursework where it is built in there. You've seen movies like Minority Report where they're playing with the data on the screen. That's classic AR/VR. The next to the last, Creative Communicator Standard. Students communicate clearly and express themselves creatively for a variety of purposes. You can see that two of those, the students choose appropriate platforms and the students create original works responsible, is not really built into this, again, from an AR/VR point of view to support the students. And again, it's supported by the content. The last standard, Global Collaborator, students use digital tools to broaden their perspective. And you can see out of those 4 substandards, the last 2 are the ones that aren't natively supported by the technology by itself. Students contribute constructively to project teams, and then students explore local and global issues. As you can see from these 7 standards and their substandards, AR/VR strongly correlates to student success if the technology was implemented properly and if you have the content available. In the areas where they do not, the gaps could be easily addressed in the course material, such as explicitly calling out a student's responsibility to honor intellectual property and prior art of someone else. So in summary, AR/VR is here, and it's becoming more and more prevalent and will be foundational and fundamental in the transformation of education at all levels, along with transforming businesses and entertainment. In essence, this will become our new reality, one which blurs the line of the digital and the real world. As an educator and leaders, it is incumbent upon us to properly prepare our students for this strange but wonderful new world.